then 2 + 2 would still equal 4. People don't need to recognize a moral truth to be a moral truth for it to be moral.
They do if you're talking about a moral system. If you want to create computer code and get people to start programming in it, you've got to be able to convince them about ones and zeros.
Yeah.
So 2 + 2 = 4 isn't even in the same ballpark of there is a God. It's either true or it's not, but it's not a foundation for something. If you're talking about a moral system, the true foundation is agreement on what the foundation is, that the three of us care about human beings.
We had the God who was the master, came down, became the slave, he paid the slave price.
I know the story.
Yeah.
You can't demonstrate it's true.
We've been asking, can atheism deliver a better world? Talking about this in the context of morality, Matt. First of all, from the outset, what do you say just to that question? We haven't even asked that yet. Can atheism deliver a better world? What's your sort of...
I have no idea. I've never suggested that atheism or even secular humanism guarantees a better world. First of all, we're always dealing with human beings. And so you can come up with whatever rule system you want. And it's like, I got a thing wrong on the show the other day. Somebody was talking about natural family planning, and I confused it with the rhythm method, and I kind of mocked it. There's nothing wrong with natural family planning other than you have to actually follow it diligently, and it will result in you having sex less often. And then within the Roman Catholic Church, they are required to just abstain rather than using alternate things during fertility. There's nothing, I'm not saying that secular humanism guarantees a better world. But even if we take what Glenn's saying, even if you were to look at this as Christianity light without the God thing, I would already view that as better because A, we guarantee that we have humans' best interests at heart. That's humanism. It's the foundation of it. You can say, and you would be correct, that it's just a bold, bald assertion that we should care about humans. Okay? I have no response to that. I don't even know why anybody would want to come up with a response. There's nothing that says the world will be better this way, except for this. I did a debate in a Church of Christ where I told them I could write a better book than the Bible and I could prove it to them. Because I could rewrite it word for word, reverse its position on slavery, and it would be a better book. Because for the people who are looking at this, not so much as metaphorical lessons or like that, if they're looking at this as an instruction book for life, that book advocates slavery. That's not even a question. If you were to say, thou shalt not own a human being as property, that would be better than saying you can and that you can pass them on. And so this was the example I used for the people who are kind of like Bible worshipers, not the people who go in looking for, hey, there's an interesting message here, or they're going to tell me something about my life, but no, this is literally word for word, blah, That type of mindset is probably more responsible for the harm and damage that a lot of us would lay at the foot of Christianity than Glenn's version, for sure. I mean, I don't think Glenn's pro-slavery at all. And when you start looking at things where you are finding a way to take a message that could easily be viewed as this is a blood magic sacrifice and say, well, life has to consume life to exist, and you want to kind of maybe blow off why God would have made it that way or why it had to be made that way, which is a weird and interesting theological discussion. Getting rid of those things and keeping the good parts is all I've advocated for ever. And secular humanism, to me, is taking the good parts, whether they're found in Christianity, Judaism, Scientology.
And who's deciding on, in a sense, and the good is simply defined by what you regard as the measure of human well-being, and anything that basically points us in that direction.
Yeah, and it's not
as the moral.
And it's not fully defined or anything else. But to pretend that we don't have some beginning understanding of it, I think is a bit ridiculous.
Okay. So so I think very briefly, in the sense that Matt is sketching out this idea that there is a secular morality.
Well, there's an example that came along with this that Glenn produced when he was listing off societal health versus religiosity and teeing me up for the Gregory S. Paul thing. He mentioned divorce rates. But that comes with the presumption that divorce is a bad thing.
Sure.
And I don't believe that. I'm recently divorced. Me and my ex-wife are as good friends now as we ever were, and better. And we're both in agreement that it was absolutely the right thing for us to do. And so what's happened here is, from my perspective, and obviously people can disagree, religious thinking, religious teaching, religious dogma has done a number of great disservices to human beings by setting up a notion of a soulmate, by setting up the notion that marriage needs to be one man, one woman forever. That's caused countless problems. By setting up a view of death that does not allow people to deal with that. If we started with a notion that death is the eventual consequence of life, it would fundamentally change, and that was the end as far as we knew, and anything else would be a bonus. It would fundamentally change, I think, how we treated people while they were still alive. And so there's a number of problems here that are rooted in the theology, rooted in the notion that there's a God, which I think if you set those aside and just focus on the things that actually directly try to benefit human beings, it has to be better.
So it's all the benefits of Christianity plus a few more, because you haven't got some of the baggage, essentially.
Well, Matt said that he could write a Bible that's superior to the Bible by reversing its position on slavery. I think if you started from scratch without the Bible, though, I don't think you, and I don't think anyone has, written a book or a series of books or a collection of books, a library of books, that has done what the Bible has done for slavery in the world. Because slavery is a human universal. And it has not been overturned by anyone other than those who took the Bible seriously back in the 18th century. There were evangelical Christians, there were Quakers, there were people who took the Bible seriously. So
Parts of it seriously.
It's a longer discussion about how you take the Old Testament. But that's got to be interesting at least, because I mean we can't do a compare and contrast. There's no A/B testing about this. Okay,
Which I think kind of undermines what you were just saying. And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm in agreement with you. Mm-hmm. You're viewing it as nobody else has done this, and you don't think anybody else could. And my thing is, we have no way to find that out because we live in a world where this is the way things happened. And so to argue that you couldn't actually write a list of moral precepts from scratch that are superior to Christianity.
But then aren't you saying, okay, at least with the Christian side, we've got, there is one group of people that has guaranteed universal equality for all human beings and has ended the slave trade. Okay, it might have taken far longer than you would have wanted it to have taken. But there is one group of people who have done that. We don't know if anyone has or could do that. Let's give it a go anyway. Let's walk away from this thing that has given us all these benefits of the universities and the hospitals and the schools and the scientific method and the emancipation of the slaves and all this sort of stuff. Let's walk away from that. That's quite a leap of faith, don't you think?
And let's be honest, religion, especially Christianity, does not have a clean record when it comes to building a better world. Matt is right to challenge that. The Bible never clearly bans slavery. It regulates it. Leviticus 25:44-46 literally says you can buy slaves and pass them on as property. Ephesians 6:5 tells slaves to obey their masters. That's not moral leadership, that's permission. A simple human rule like don't own people is already better. And history backs this up. Yes, some Christians fought slavery, but many others used the Bible to defend it. In the American South, slave owners quoted scripture to justify owning human beings. So which version of Christianity are we supposed to trust? Now compare that to secular thinking. Human rights, like equality, freedom, and dignity, grew out of Enlightenment ideas, not church doctrine. Science, democracy, and modern law improved when we stopped treating ancient texts as perfect authority.
And am I also getting the sense, Glenn, that, I mean, I want to come back to this human at the centre of this, and the fact that Matt says, hey, humans are humans, and yet it's natural that we're going to prefer ourselves, and that's where the morality comes from, our own best interests. And you're saying, no, somehow Christianity has actually grounded an intrinsic dignity to the human that Matt's godless ethics isn't necessarily going to support. It might go in that direction for a moment, but there's no ultimate foundation to it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are always going to look after ourselves, but who is we, and who are ourselves in that conversation? And we are always wanting to narrow the circle around us and our mates and exclude the other tribe and exclude the other kinds of people. So, you know, in the news here in the UK, just recently they brought in a non-invasive prenatal test for Down syndrome. And it had the reliable effect that everybody knew it was going to have. As people knew that they were going to have children with Down syndrome, they aborted them at ever higher rates. And yet the headlines said, children with Down syndrome down 30%. And it sounded like people had found a cure for Down syndrome or something like that. They hadn't found a cure for Down syndrome. They'd just drawn the circle around humanity and kept those with that condition on the outside and wanted to eliminate them. And that to me is a very chilling way of proceeding with a kind of a humanism, because that's always the danger. Like, who is us? Who are those who we are going to grant with the right to life? And who are those who we are going to say, they do not qualify? And it's always tempting for the humans to say, okay, it's the strong who will make the decision, and it's the weak who must take the hindmost. What is it that's going to stand up for all humans, regardless of capacity, regardless of attributes, regardless of achievements? Who is it who's going to stand up for all humans and actually be true humanists and grant them human rights too?
This is the problem. So first of all, whether or not that abortion scenario that you're talking about is humanism or not is subject for a whole nother debate. But you say, well, nobody could do this. And then when we talk about, here's a list of precepts where we don't include God in it, then your answer is, now you're just borrowing from Christianity. It's Christianity light, and you've just removed the God. And then the other objection that you're going to launch a second morality is, what's going to be the foundation beyond this? At least we have a foundation. It's God. Well, what if people don't accept your foundation? That is exactly the same objection that you are leveraging, you're launching at secular humanism. Whatever problems secular humanism may have with regard to foundations of ethics, no religious foundation has any way of solving that. Because ultimately, if until some God comes in and says, I am in fact the God of the universe and I am the moral authority, and people are forced to recognize that this is the case, then the only thing that's happening is Glenn's saying God is the foundation of morality and I'm saying humans are. And nobody is going to be, neither of those systems is going to work for people who don't accept that that's a foundation.
Do people have to all recognise this foundation in order for it to be the foundation?
No, and people don't need to recognise that 2 + 2 = 4 for it to be the case that 2 + 2 = 4, and for you to go to your grave proclaiming that 2 + 2 = 4. Even if the whole world said it was otherwise, then 2 + 2 would still equal 4. People don't need to recognise a moral truth to be a moral truth for it to be moral.
They do if you're talking about a moral system. If you want to create, computer code and get people to start programming in it, you've got to be able to convince them about ones and zeros.
Yeah.
So 2 + 2 = 4 isn't even in the same ballpark of there is a God. It's either true or it's not, but it's not a foundation for something. If you're talking about a moral system, the true foundation is agreement on what the foundation is, that the three of us care about human beings. And then we can start arguing about how much we care and where there's going to be conflicts and everything else. But as long we can't do any of that until we agree on that foundation. And if Glenn's foundation is there's a God at the bottom of this and he can't demonstrate that, then we're not even going to get started on solving the problem.
That's not what 2 + 2 = 4 is the analog of in this conversation. 2 + 2 = 4 is the analog of all human beings are worthy of provision and protection. All of them. Right? Would you agree with that? All members of the human family, no matter what their achievements, no matter what their attributes, all members of the human family are worthy of all provision and protection.
I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. That's a problem. It's definitely a problem, especially when you've got people who are discovering disabled children in the womb.
When I say I have no idea, it's about that simplification. My instinct is, of course, to say yes.
It's a very Christian instinct.
Thank you. That's a very atheist response. The instinct, of course, say yes. The problem is that when we start talking about the specific in the language, there are going to be rights conflicts that we have to address.
Sure, but all other things being equal, as a general principle, would you say that what Glenn has laid down there is one that you could agree to? The importance of treating
sure, in the general colloquial sense, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what's your point then, Glenn? That this 2 + 2 = 4, as it were, this agreement, that doesn't exist just on the basis of Matt's preferences. It's a fact in the way 2 + 2 = 4 is a fact, as far as you're concerned.
Yes. See, and that I don't agree with. It is certainly there are things that we're going to agree on. That I don't know how you could ever demonstrate that this is in fact like true, like some intrinsic truth about like, for example, I think human lives have incredible value. I don't think they have any intrinsic value. I don't think the universe cares at all about human life. They have value because they have value to us.
And who's us?
Humans.
All humans?
Well, cognitive able humans who are able to consider the proposition of whether or not they have value.
Which is the strong, and that's my problem, is that it becomes an ever shrinking circle of humanity that we have, and it's the strong who rule over the weak.
Well, the characterization of evolution as being strong over the weak, I would argue isn't necessarily accurate, but it's also, because there's no decision there. It's whatever survives, survives. And what is strong in one sense, a weakness may become a strength depending on the situation. That's what evolution does. It's not like, ooh, me, He-Man, you weak, I'm going to kill you type thing. Maybe, for example, sickle cell anemia provides protection against certain things. And so while it may be under certain circumstances, there's a reason why animals develop camouflage and other changes. It's because
Glenn tries to argue that without God, morality falls apart, that humans will just decide who matters and who doesn't. But that completely ignores how religion has actually worked in the real world. Christianity talks about intrinsic dignity, yet it has a long history of excluding people. Women were treated as subordinate, 1 Timothy 2:12. LGBTQ individuals are condemned, Romans 1:26-27. And again, slavery was accepted. So this idea that Christianity protects everyone equally just doesn't match reality. Look at modern societies with lower religiosity. Countries like Sweden, Norway, and Japan. They rank higher in quality of life, lower in crime, and stronger in human rights. That didn't come from strict religious control. It came from policies focused on human well-being. And the foundation argument falls apart too. Saying God is the foundation solves nothing if you can't prove God exists. It just becomes one group claiming authority over everyone else. At least secular ethics is honest about where it comes from. Humans deciding to care about humans. And once you agree on that, you can build laws, rights, and systems that actually reduce suffering, based on evidence, not belief.
Why, in your view, was it wrong for, I'm sorry to invoke Godwin's law, even though we're near the end of the programme, why was it wrong for Hitler and the Nazis to, euthanize disabled people and gay people and people that they felt were outside of their their circle of who they consider to be human. What was the kind of...
I'm not convinced they considered them outside the circle of what they consider to be human. They had a view that these were somehow inferior humans. I think they would all acknowledge they were human, just that they were somehow inferior or less
races.
or less diverting. Things like that.
Master race.
So it's one of those things where people say...
Because a lot of people would say Hitler was wrong about a fact there. Whereas from what I'm wondering, like, and we're getting to the issue of, is there this objective moral value to humanity? And
well, it reminds me of the people who argue that, hey, slavery is really good for the slave owners. And so if you're a slave owner, you can look at this and say, hey, slavery is a good thing because it benefits me. The problem is that when you look at the larger picture, it's actually not necessarily good for the slave owners. And beginning to recognize that every member of society affects potentially every other member, fundamentally changes, and it shifts our in-group, out-group dynamic. So that when Hitler goes after the Jews for whatever religious reasons he had, for whatever superior, uber guy reasons he had, that's fundamentally different from whether or not killing them makes society worse or better. And it's kind of this thing of, oh, this is what I think makes us better, which is independent from what actually makes us think better. Nobody, not Sam nor I, nor anybody, is suggesting that if we begin with an agreement on well-being as a foundation, that there aren't going to be things that we think we have the right answer about and find out we were wrong.
At that stage, then, it would seem like instead of having World War II, we would have a symposium in which the Nazis would present their papers and others would present other papers, and then we'd have a panel and we'd discuss them and we'd try and thrash it out. At what stage do you say that their vision for updating, for evolving, for having a master race, at what stage do you say that that is morally unjustified and therefore there is a just war that can be fought against them?
What? I don't know that there's an answer for that apart from assessing the individual situations, which is what we did. Mm-hmm. But we didn't have to rely on a God for it.
Well, we relied on 1939 years of Christian understanding of what is the good life, and the good life is the sacrifice of the strong for the protection of the weak, and Hitler was doing the exact opposite of that, and so it was very obvious to people in that sense the evil of the Nazis, and they went and fought a just war against it. But
sure. So it was Christianity that was the credit for ending the Nazi regime, and why people, not even Judaism.
No, it was Christianity that had shaped the West and its moral sensibilities, such that Nazism appeared to them as very obviously the very reverse of the way of the cross.
So this is something that you just can't argue with, because it's just an assertion from Glenn's perspective, because if we come up with something that is good, we're borrowing from Christianity. There's no way to not be accused of borrowing, because Christianity was around before. And if you find something that was before Christianity, well, that was foreshadowing Christianity. Because the God that he believes in has been there forever. Mm-hmm. So anything true and good that was pre-Christ was God foreshadowing it. And anything is after, it's somebody borrowing from it. There's no response to this. And there's also no way for him to demonstrate that that's what's happening.
Is that a fair criticism, Glenn?
Well, I think we've said from Old Testament to New Testament, we've said from Genesis 1, I totally believe in the same God from the beginning. But I think what is the unique thing about the Christian story is you've got the sacrifice of the fittest for the survival of the weakest. You've got this way of the cross. You've got this way of Jesus, which is unlike the Greco-Roman world. It's unlike the Persian world. It's unlike the Babylonians. It's unlike the Muslim world. It is very like what secular humanists now say about inclusion and welcome and diversity and bringing people to the center and caring for the weak and the
if
poor.
You're very selective about what you read. You know what would be really nice about Christianity, if it were the nice, unique feature of Christianity was if it could be demonstrated to be true. Mm-hmm. That would be a unique feature among religions, which would be very nice.
Well, we had the God who was the master, came down, became the slave. He paid the slave price.
I know the story.
Yeah.
You can't demonstrate it's true.
Well, we're living in the effects of it. We're living in the ripples of the after effects.
You can't prove that's true either. That's just how you're viewing it. I don't think we're living in the rippled effects of people who believe that to be true, which is independent from whether or not it is true.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've all got our different standards of what would qualify as evidence.
Which is why, and this is the thing. This is why I keep saying that I have yet to be presented with an objection from religious, an objection to secular morals that religions solve. And it's not, God could fix this. If there is a God, God could fix this just like that. Just like he could have said, thou shalt not own another human being as property. Instead, he was more concerned about wearing mixed fabrics and whether or not you should eat shrimp, evidently.
I mean, it's a conversation about the old covenant that we can have, but the old covenant's called old for a very good reason. What I've been saying again and again is...
Why would there be multiple covenants? Why can't God just say, here's the way things are?
That's just the law. That's just the law. The law does say, here's the way things are. But as we've both admitted, humans get things wrong. Like what we need is grace. What we need is the God who is the lawgiver to actually come and save us, to actually come and forgive us for all the different ways that we get things wrong.
So I don't think I need a God to come and save me or forgive me. I think I need a God to come down and demonstrate that he exists.
Mm-hmm. The God who comes down, in the Christian sense, is the God who becomes incarnate. But a number of times, Matt, you've used the word of God being sort of a super being, or I don't know, what was the phrase you used? Anyway, a super being, which I imagine to be something kind of within the created order, and who might appear in a cloud and that sort of thing.
Are you talking about today? Because the only time I talked about super being was when we were referencing Nazis.
No, super.
Anyway,
forgive me.
But carry on.
God is not one more item within the created order. He is the source of being, and so for you to say why isn't God showing himself? It's a bit like Juliet saying, where is Shakespeare? Like in one sense, where isn't Shakespeare? Okay,
it's kind of the opposite of that, because in that category you have a fictional character asking where's the real one, and in this one you have the real character asking where's the fictional one.
No, but are you the fictional one?
I'm not. I'm the real one.
I'm a real boy,
as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and yet you did not give life to yourself.
Isn't one of Glenn's contentions, though, in a sense, that if you're looking for evidence for God, we find it by looking at the fact that we have this intrinsic view that humans are equal, and that isn't something we can just deduce from science. Science doesn't have anything particularly to say to our moral values.
Because it's not a truth. It's not intrinsically true. It's not like 2 + 2 = 4.
It's not a mathematical truth. I mean, in terms of morality, are you an objective? Do you believe in objective moral values, or like?
Not the objective foundation, but the objective assessment with regard to the foundation. I think well-being is the best that we've come up with.
But in that sense, so science, as far as it can give us a morality, like Sam Harris says, is once we've agreed what the goal is, and then
right. If you agree on what the goal is, then you can.
There's no ultimate sort of There's no ultimate foundation
Correct.
of saying this is the way this is the goal we should all aspire to. But presumably, Glenn, you believe there is some kind of ultimate thing that we're made for, something we're about, a grand narrative we're living in,
right?
And the fact that we recognise that somehow within ourselves evidence for God in your view?
You can make a moral argument for God's existence, yes. I do believe God is love and the good life is to live in love, and I believe that not just Christians can recognise this and not just Christians do recognise this.
Well, we can do the same thing. So this thing of the fact that we seem to have a desire for meaning, purpose, value, all those things, he'll use as evidence for the God, because that serves as an explanation for it. I can do that with that exact same example. The reason that Glenn sees God as the justification for that is because he's uncomfortable with the possibility that there isn't an explanation for it, or that this isn't some sort of universal truth. So a preference for, I want there to be intrinsic human dignity, gets you to, hey, if there was a God, there would be human dignity because this God is guaranteeing it. And so that same circular preference is there. I'm just eliminating both of them and saying, I'm going to go ahead because I care about human beings and I value human beings because I am one, and say whether there's a God or not, this is what I'm going to go for. And if there's a God that has a better way, they can demonstrate it. Why isn't a Damascus Road experience good enough for everybody?
The Nazis were not operating in some atheist vacuum. Germany was overwhelmingly Christian. Hitler himself used religious language, talked about doing God's work, and churches across Europe often cooperated or stayed silent. So the idea that Christianity clearly stopped evil is just not true. It coexisted with it. And look at the logic Glenn is using. He's saying, if something good happens, it came from Christianity. If it happened before Christianity, it was foreshadowing. If it happens after, it's borrowing. That's not evidence. That's a closed loop where Christianity can never be wrong. Matt exposes the real issue. There is no proof behind the claim. You're told God is the foundation, but it can't be demonstrated. Meanwhile, the Bible focuses on rules like not wearing mixed fabrics, Leviticus 19:19, or avoiding shellfish, Leviticus 11:10, yet stays unclear on major moral issues like slavery. Atheism doesn't need to play these games. We judge actions by results. The Nazis were wrong because they caused massive suffering and destruction, something we can measure, study, and understand without appealing to religion. That's the difference. One system depends on belief, the other depends on reality. So now the question is simple. Do we really need religion to build a moral world? Or can humans do better using reason, evidence, and empathy alone? I want to hear what you think. Drop your answer in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out part 1 of this debate where they go deep into the blood magic and sacrifice themes in the Bible. You don't want to miss that.